Welcome to another Seekers Hub podcast production. You're listening to This Is Your Faith with Shaykh Ahmed Abdo of the Shifa Institute in Sydney, Australia. Visit seekershub.org for free online courses, our reliable answer service, and engaging media.
I begin by the name of Allah, the most gracious, the supremely merciful. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All praise is due to Allah, the sustainer of all the worlds. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the supremely merciful and the highly compassionate. Maliki Yawmiddin, the owner and the ruler of the Day of Judgment. Iyyaka na'budu, you alone we worship. Wa iyyaka nasta'een, and it is through your assistance that we seek. Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim, guide us on the straight path. Sirat al-ladina an'amta alayhim, the path of those who have earned your favor. Ghayri al-maghdubi alayhim, not the path of those who have earned your anger. Wala ad-dallin, nor the path of those who have gone astray. Ameen. O Allah, O God, accept our prayer. وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and we descend from the Qur'an that which is a spiritual healing and a mercy and compassion for those who have attained faith. وَلَا يَزِيدُ الظَّالِمِينَ إِلَّا خَسَارًا, and as for those who make the choice in their lives to intently and purposefully oppress their own selves and others, then such are those who will only have increase in loss and failure. O descendants of Adam, we have sent you clothing to hide your shame and adorn you. Though the garment of God consciousness is best. These are among the signs of God, so that you may take heed. Such are the various signs of the Qur'an, the ayat of the Qur'an, or the verses and the words of the Qur'an. The Qur'an, which is seen to the Muslim community as a form of spiritual healing. The Qur'an, which was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as a noble book and the verbatim word of God. The Qur'an, which is translated as the recital, the criterion, the distinction between truth and falsehood. Any person from whatever discipline that they come in this life will find some guidance in the Qur'an. The jurisprudent, the jurist will find guidance in the Qur'an, for such a person will seek to extract and derive the legal rulings from one of the principal sources of the Islamic sacred law, and that is the Qur'an. For it is seen as one of the two primary sources, the first being the Qur'an itself, being the noble book, and the second being the guidance of its follower and the one upon whom the Qur'an was revealed upon his heart. His name was Muhammad, peace be upon him, which is known as the Sunnah, or the way of Muhammad. So for the jurist, he seeks guidance in the Qur'an in order to determine the legal classification of the physical actions that a person will perform in their life, whether they're obligatory upon him, whether they're recommended, or whether they're simply permissible, or disliked and reprehensible, or to the other extreme, that which is unlawful and prohibited. So such a jurist will spend his life going through the words of the Qur'an and trying to come to a greater understanding of where to place certain verses and their application in relation to the continual deeds that a person does in their life. Whether they relate to the deeds of physical worship that a person does between himself and his Lord by a prayer or almsgiving or the fasting or conducting the pilgrimage, or their dealings with others, that is, in trade and commerce, in buying and selling. The Qur'an itself even has verses which will come and bring guidance to a people when they take loans from one another, when they go out their commerce and in their trade. Likewise, in the laws of marriage and inheritance, the jurist will find guidance there. Also in the laws of crime and punishment and the political affairs of the state, the Qur'an will give guidance to its followers in that nature. So the jurist will find guidance in the Qur'an. Likewise, the historian will find guidance in the Qur'an. The historian, the one who seeks to look to past events and historical occurrences in order to come to a greater understanding of their contemporary and present situation. So they will look to the stories and the events of past kings and rulers, of great prophets and messengers, of civilizations and nations, which were once superior and great, but nowadays they have only their traces, which will give a reference to them. So the historian has guidance in the Qur'an. Likewise, the one who seeks to interpret the verses of the Qur'an, the ayat of the Qur'an, in order to take a guidance, means of spiritual wayfaring to their Lord, to the Divine, will also find within the Qur'an an understanding and a means of guidance. However, the illustrious scholars and imams of the Muslim civilization, amongst them the great Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, known as the Proof of Islam, he came up with a text and a book which he himself called Jawahir al-Qur'an, the jewels of the Qur'an. And in this remarkable text, he expounds upon the Qur'an and he organizes the Qur'an in its various sciences. And so, beginning with the Qur'an, he gives it the similitude of an oyster shell, or any shell that one may find in the ocean. And he says that it has an outer and it has an inner. And the inner itself has an outer and it has an inner. And he says that most people are concerned with the outer sciences of the Noble Qur'an. These being the sciences of the rules of recitation, the rules of tajweed. For if a person, usually a follower of the Qur'an, were to wish to recite the Qur'an, then it is incumbent upon such a person to learn the rules of recitation of the Qur'an, because it is unlike any other book. So even it comes with a means and a method in order to recite it. And so they will undertake the learning of the pronunciation rules of the Arabic text of the Qur'an. Furthermore, they will then study the various modes of recitation of the Qur'an, these being the variants and the letters in which it was revealed in. For in one of the traditions of the Prophet ﷺ, peace be upon him, he said that this Qur'an was revealed in 7 modes of recitation, meaning there are variant readings of the Qur'an, all being revelations from Allah, however variants depending on the particular dialect within the people of the Arabs upon whom it was revealed, such that they will recite the Qur'an according to their own local dialect. And the various commentators have different interpretations of what it means to understand the 7 variants of the Qur'an. And so these outer sciences of the Qur'an, included in this is the science of Arabic and Arabic grammar and morphology and the understanding of certain words and their technical meanings and the meanings linguistically. Also, one has within the outer sciences of the Qur'an the science of exegesis, of the commentary of Qur'an, in which the commentators of the Qur'an will go into the various reasons by which certain verses were revealed, and when one verse will supersede or aggregate another verse, and then when certain verses have general applications and others have detailed specific applications. So such will be the work of the commentator of the Qur'an in assistance with the jurists who will go into the Qur'an in order to benefit themselves via its teachings. However, he says, Imam al-Ghazali says that of all these sciences and scholars, those who are closest to the surface of the Qur'an, meaning they haven't yet reached the surface of the Qur'an, those who are closest to the surface of the Qur'an are the commentators of the Qur'an, because they give to the Qur'an and they interpret from the Qur'an various meanings. And the Qur'an itself, according to some of the pious and the righteous, they used to say that in Ramadan, every year in Ramadan is the 9th month of the Islamic lunar year and is traditionally understood by Muslims to be the month in which the Qur'an was first revealed. And so he says, one of these scholars, he says that every Ramadan when I recite the Qur'an, I feel a new meaning being imparted onto my heart. So when Muslims call the Qur'an Al-Qur'an Al-Kareem, they call it the noble Qur'an. Another meaning of Kareem, other than being noble, is someone who is generous, meaning he has the attribute of karam, which is generosity. So one asks, well, how is the Qur'an generous? It's a book like any other book. How can it be generous? They say that the generosity of the Qur'an is like any generous person. When you come as a guest to another person's home, then you expect for them to be hospitable to you and to be generous. And so they'll come to you with cakes and sweets and drinks and juices. Likewise, the Qur'an, when you come to the home of the Qur'an is generous in its givings. It will grant you great meanings and spiritual insights and understandings of the inner workings of this entire cosmos and the universe, and at the center of it, the individual human being. For the Qur'an has three directions. It has a direction which deals with you and yourself. This direction which deals with you and yourself, it comes in order to seek to rectify your own dealings with your own self. And perhaps you're saying, well, what's this person talking about? How can I deal with my own self? I'm only one person, I'm not two or three. You yourself are a body and a soul. And within Muslim tradition and understanding, the human being had a life before this particular life. And so he was alive in a spiritual realm, in a realm and a world of the souls. And so this particular life is one whereby the soul has been cast into the vehicle of the human body, and then after the body is deceased and extinct from this life, the soul continues in its journey. And so what the Qur'an has done by the word of Allah is it has come to seek to grant instruction and guidance to a humanity who were traversing in this particular period of temporal time. And then after this relationship that a person has with their own selves, they also have a relationship with the creatures around them, meaning other than himself or herself. My relationship with other people, my relationship with the environment, my relationship with the universe, my relationship with all the creatures and all of creation and existence. This is the second realm of the Qur'an. But the highest form of the Qur'an and the highest address of the Qur'an is the one where it seeks to take the creature, seeks to take the created being from this realm of the seen and physical existence to the realm of the spiritual and the unseen. The realm of the metaphysical world, which goes beyond that which one can see and one can hear and one can taste with one's tongue. But if you like, it gives one a sixth sense, such that it brings oneself in connection to a parallel world which is in existence at the moment. And Muslim belief is, as with other monotheistic beliefs, that there is a parallel world as we are living at this particular moment. And this parallel world is inhabited by various spiritual creatures, such as a jinn kind, a spiritual being, whom God has created from smokeless fire. In addition to this, a being which has been created from pure light, and this is the being of the angels, whom God has created such that they have no choice to disobey Him, but rather in obedience of Him at all times. This same spiritual realm, which is in existence at the moment, is the realm of the paradise and the hellfire, which Muslims believe are in existence at the moment, and the realm of the grave and the life which occurs in the grave. While we are on top of this earth, and then those who have passed away are beneath the earth, there is also a life which Muslims believe they are living. And the Qur'an comes to expound on this particular relationship, such that a human being is not occupied and is not constrained by that which he sees and that which he hears, and that which he tastes and that which he touches. This is not the extent of the human being, but rather takes him to another realm and another world. And at the peak and the height of this world and this existence is the Lord of existence, who Muslims believe was the creator of the entire universe, and who Muslims believe was the one who brought the Qur'an, and the Qur'an itself is his verbatim word. So in the minutes that we have today, having given the title to this presentation, the spiritual fountains of the Qur'an, if one were to speak about the Qur'an, one can speak from now until the evening and never stop. So what we are going to do, by the permission of the Almighty Allah, is to recite a few verses in their translated English meanings, and then to delve into their spiritual meanings. The Qur'an itself has various modes of understanding. One of these modes of understanding or interpretation is the literal interpretation. And this is obligatory on every believer in the Qur'an to adopt this interpretation and to accept this interpretation and this understanding as being true and not to deny it. Also, in addition to this, the Qur'an, as the scholars say, has a multitude of meanings and cannot be limited to one particular area or to one particular understanding. And so therefore, every person who comes to take his portion from the great generosity of the home of the Qur'an will take a portion according to his own degree of understanding and contemplation, and his own extent of being connected to the divine. Because a person who is divorced from the divine, an individual who is disconnected from the Creator who revealed the Qur'an, then such a person's understanding and benefit from the Qur'an will be fairly limited. But the more one connects and attaches himself or herself to the Creator of the heavens and the earth, and the one who revealed the Qur'an through his word, then such a person will find benefit in it. For the one who revealed the Qur'an says, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. He says after Alif Lam Mim, when you open the Qur'an, the second chapter, called the Cow or the Baqarah, starts with 3 Arabic letters. Alif Lam Mim, like A-L-M, if you like. Alif Lam Mim, 3 letters. And any classical book of commentary of the Qur'an, if you go to look to it and you look up that verse, it will say that Allah knows best. God knows best the meaning of this verse. However, some have given it various meanings, but the foundation is we don't know what the meaning of that is. The reason for this is that, O human being, God is addressing creation and existence. O human being, you who have mastered the various sciences and various technologies, and have progressed in your understanding of the way in which the world works, and your grasping of the Arabic language and every other language on the earth, the binary language of the computers and every other language, come give me a meaning for this verse, these 3 letters, Alif Lam Mim. The human being stands dumbfounded, I don't know, oh God. And so then in the next verse God says, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. Therein is the book where there is no doubt in that book. لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. It is a guidance for those who have taqwa. And taqwa here is a means of God consciousness. To be aware that the divine is overwatching and watchful and aware of everything that you do. To have this spiritual witnessing, this vigilant observation of a human being, of the divine witnessing, then one will gain God consciousness. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. There is no doubt in it, and it is a guidance for those who have taqwa. And then Allah explains in the subsequent ayat and verses, those who are of this particular description, gives those descriptions. So let us now recite one verse in Surah Al-An'am, chapter number 6, Surah number 6 of the Qur'an, verses 95 and 96. And we'll mention just the translation of the meaning because of our limited time. It is God who causes the grain of corn and the date stones to sprout. He brings forth the living from the dead, and it is He who brings forth the dead from the living. That is your God. How then are you turned back? He causes the break of day, and has made the night for rest, and the sun and moon the means for reckoning time. That is the measure determined by the Almighty, the All-Knowing. In these verses, God explains to us a physical occurrence, and that is, He establishes that if you think there is anyone else in this entire existence that causes the grain to sprout from the ground and allows for it to become a date palm tree or a corn plant or anything else, then you have thought wrong. For verily, it is God who gives it life. When you have a deceased person, someone dies, they breathe their last, what do you do with them? You place them under the ground, do you not? Why? Because they're dead. So can you explain to me, by God, when you take a seed and you bury it in the ground. What are you doing? You have something that has no life, putting into something that has no life, and you expect it to sprout? How so? When you place a dead person underneath the surface of the earth, you bury them, hoping that they decompose. But when you take a seed that has no movement and no life, you shake it. There's no movement, no life. There's nothing green in it. But you place it under the earth, under the surface of the earth, such that no human eye can see it. But you expect that it grows? Who gives it life? God is testifying to this particular reality, and He says, it is God who causes the grain of corn and the date stones to sprout. I mean, sprout out of no life. And look how intelligent the ant is. When the ant goes and collects its seed and its grain in order to hoard it, so when it has difficulty, it breaks the seed. Why does it break the seed? Such that if floods come and rain comes, it doesn't grow and destroy its home. And so it has this intelligence and understanding that there is life in the seed, but the apparent nature of the seed is that it has no life. He brings forth the living from the dead. And so, if God were to love a servant of His, then He will cause the heart of such a servant to sprout with divine yearning and love. Why is it that you see part of humanity has no inclination towards God and the divine, and will be content to live this life in following their own passions and desires? But another part of humanity, they testify and bear witness that there is a divine God who is the creator and originator of the heavens and the earth. If God places this love and He loves His servant, He will cause the heart to sprout with divine yearning and love. Such that in the same way that this seed, when it is watered with the rainwater and given the sunlight, it ascends and it seeks to go to that which is high and sublime. Likewise the heart, which is watered with the seeds of love and divine assistance and mercy and sustenance, this heart will then grow in order to seek the divine and that which is beyond it and superior to it. And so, in this particular way, the heart will continue to lean in affection to the divine presence. And the rays of the intellect of such a human being will shake in an increasing contemplation upon the greatness of the divine. When the plant grows and sprouts from the earth, it begins to wrap itself around anything it can wrap. And so likewise, the heart, when it's given the nourishment of divine love and spiritual assistance from God, then it can seek to attach itself to that which is firm. And God also says in another verse, and cling tightly to the rope of Allah, of God. And so there is a rope of God which has been sent down from the heavens in the form of the Qur'an and in the form of the guidance of the one who wrote the Qur'an, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And so such a heart, in its infancy, if it holds on and it clings on to those things which are constant and not variable, they're not going to change, because God Himself is the eternal and He doesn't change, and infinite. So this will grant contemplation upon the greatness of the divine. And then what happens? He brings forth the living from the dead, and it is He who brings forth the dead from the living. That is your God. How then you turn back? He causes the break of day, and has made the night for rest, and the sun and the moon the means for reckoning time. Before the sun of gnosis dawns upon the heart of the human being, the sun of the knowledge of the divine and the knowledge of the Creator, then until this point, there will be no light and there will be no life to such a heart. And so, after the darkness of the night of human existence, when a human is divorced from the divine, a human is divorced from his origin, then he continues to live life in the evening and the darkness of human existence, divorced from divinity. Such a person will wait until the sun of knowledge of God dawns upon his heart, such that it allows the heart to sprout with life. And so, in this way, he will gain life by his gnosis of his Lord. After he was dead, but his death was what? He wasn't dead physically, because such a person was moving around and walking and talking and studying and going to university and going to work and undertaking a career and profession and bringing up a family. Such a person was physically alive. But when the heart itself is divorced from the one who gives life, He is al-muhyi and al-mumit. As God says in other places in the Qur'an, He is the granter of life and the giver of death. So the one who is disconnected from the one who gives life, and how can he have life? And the one who is divorced from the one who is eternal, who has life without end, then how can such a person seek life and claim life in their particular existence? And so therefore, after the human being was dead, how are they dead? By two qualities. One quality of ignorance. Ignorance of what? I was a mathematician, I was a professor. I was an expert in this particular science and in this particular science of humanities and fields. And I was a person who would do this and anything you ask me, I'll know the answer. He was knowledgeable. But about the all-knowledgeable, he was ignorant. Who is the all-knowledgeable? The one that sees my secret and my public, my night and my day, my youth and my adulthood and my old age. If the person has an ignorance about the one who has all knowledge, then he is ignorant. And so such a person's death, whilst he was on the surface of this earth, why did it occur? Because he had ignorance. And the second quality which caused him death was heedlessness. In that he didn't pay any attention. And so the plant, as a seed, who pays no attention to the water, and who does not seek to be sustained, and given nourishment and food by the water, and by the fertilizer, and by the sun, they will not grow. And so likewise the heart, who when the water and the rain of spiritual assistance comes, and the reminder of the sun comes through divine knowledge, they reject it, then such a person will be like the seed who rejected its physical assistance, and therefore will be unable to grow. And so once a person is given this divine assistance, God will then annihilate them from witnessing their own selves. And so the seed no longer grows on its own accord, but it realizes that there is a superior, supreme being that takes care of its progress. And so this revival of the human being is then taken from one, where a person witnesses his own self only, and I am the doer of my actions. I did 1, 2, and 3, and therefore there was always 4. And I studied such and such, and therefore I have such and such knowledge. And I have now so many children, and therefore I am a father. A person who attributes all of their actions to their own self, then if God has given them this divine assistance and sustenance through giving life to their hearts, then He will take them away and annihilate them from the witnessing of their own selves to witnessing the divine and God in all of their actions and in all of their existence. Such that one comes to a realization, as God says in another part of the Qur'an, He created you and that which you do, meaning you as a human being, and your deeds and actions which you perform are created by God. So you are no longer the creator of your own actions. You are no longer the creator and the one who directs your own affairs, but rather there is a divine being who directs your own affairs. But then you come and you say, well, if this divine being directs my own affairs, then how is it that I can choose between this and that? It is God that has given the individual the faculty of this choice. And He has given him the ability to distinguish between one path and the next. And so this itself is all from the divine sustenance and the divine generosity. And then the good that you do, one attributes this good to God. And the bad that you do, even though God created it out of manners with God, one attributes the bad to their own evil oppression and their own sin. And this is the best of manners that a person has with the one who originated the heavens and the earth. He says then, He causes the break of day and has made the night for rest. He has made the night of servitude a rest, they say. He has made the night a rest. You go out and do your work during the day, and in the night you rest, in order to regain your energy for the next day's work or the next day's study. And so God has made the night of servitude a rest. And if the human being realize what it means to be a servant of God, their entire life becomes a night and it becomes a rest. No longer do they experience any difficulty or any anxiety, any stress or any worry, because the night becomes a night of servitude. And the servants who love their master, anything that their master will call them to do, they will feel, I can always do more. And they will not feel the difficulty and the anxiety and the intention or the desire to steer away from the commandments of their Lord. Why? Because they have this love for their master. And so the servant who has a love for the master will love to obey. You can take this example in any of your work. If you love your manager or your team leader, anything they say for you to do, you will do it. But if you've got a problem with your manager, you just don't like them, you don't like the way they look, you don't like their name, you don't like their voice, you don't like where they come, anything about them you don't like. Any simple thing that they ask you to do, you'll feel it's difficult and it's heavy. And they're trying to get you to move mountains, but it may be just things, can you get me the pen? But you just don't like them. So the servant of God who loves God, then anything that God instructs him to do, he will do with open arms and he will even want to do more. And so likewise, in your existence of the physical realm, when you go out, you perform that which is instructed, but you don't stop there. You do even more. And so if the boss says, look, today I want you to have sales of $1,000, you go and you do 2,000. You go, you put the extra work out there, and then you'll get an extra reward from your boss. And so likewise, there are certain things which are obligatory to do before the divine, and then there are those things which are voluntary and extra. And those who perform the obligatory and then do the extra, then God has an increase in bounty and in reward. And so He made the night of servitude a rest. And so the individual who lives this life as a life of servitude, that I am a created being, and I am not the servant of my own lusts and my own desires, and my own human passions and desires, but I am a servant of the one that created me, that created my desires and the desires of all of humanity. Then such a person will live a life of freedom, a life of liberty and liberation, a life where he is no longer bound by this person or that, or this created being or the other creature, but rather he is bound by the one who created all beings and all creatures, and his name is God, or his name is Allah, or the divine, or the supreme being. And so he made the night of servitude a rest, and the sun of gnosis and the moon of faith a means of reckoning time. This is an inner interpretation of a particular verse in the Qur'an which we recited. He causes the break of day and has made the night for rest, and the sun and the moon the means for reckoning time. People use the sun as a means for reckoning time, and they also use the moon for the calendar which we follow is the solar calendar, the Gregorian calendar. And so we have 365 days or so of the year following the solar calendar. Likewise, there are faiths and peoples who use the moon as a means for reckoning time. And so, particularly for the Muslims, they fast the month of Ramadan. It begins at the signing of the moon and ends at the signing of the new moon. So, the moon and the sun are a means of reckoning time. So, what is the spiritual fountain and dimension of this particular verse? He has made the sun the night of servitude or rest, and the sun of gnosis, meaning spiritual knowledge of the divine and God, and the moon of faith, a means of reckoning time. So a person who has knowledge of God, and a person who has faith in God, then such a person will be an individual who is able to reckon and measure time. And contemplation will revolve around the rays of the sun, just like the planets revolve around the sun. As the planets revolve around the sun in our solar system, likewise the planet of contemplation, of thought, and how in need are we as a human race of contemplation and pondering, of thought, when things are getting so much quicker. No longer are we having, as we had a few years ago, if you look maybe 10, 15 years ago, everyone's internet was dial-up. If a person had 56k internet dial-up modem, that was fast. And then it started to get quicker and quicker and quicker until you got cable, and then you got ADSL and ADSL2 and plus and satellite and wireless, such that you no longer need to be connected physically in order to receive some benefit from the internet. But rather, if you like, it's a spiritual connection where there's no cables that are connecting you to the source. And so likewise with the slave of God, he doesn't need a physical cable to connect him. But rather, if his heart is directed and aligned to the divine, then he will receive the download. But he has to upload something. And so sometimes when you go to some websites, in order to download, they say, look, there's an upload-download ratio. If you want to download some movies or some books or some programs, you also need to upload. We're not going to give you anything for free. There's also an upload-download ratio between the servant and his Lord. You upload by means of devotion and spiritual worship. And the download is going to be different to the ratio with the ADSL, because usually with ADSL, your upload speed, you have a low upload speed, and you have a big download speed. In fact, it's the same. You have a higher download speed than the upload speed, usually. So likewise, you perform a little work for God, then God will give you a great download. And it's a download that's not limited by gigs, not like 20 gig or 30 gig, but rather it's unlimited, because there are many actions which God mentions in the Qur'an. He mentions a particular reward, whether it be paradise with rivers flowing underneath its meadows, or eternal sustenance and bliss in paradise, and being saved from the torment of the hellfire. Also with certain actions, and God says, and we will grant him a divine favor, a great bounty, which is unlimited, meaning God will give you whatever he wishes, and God's giving is great. And then we mention another verse, also in the same chapter, however, in verse number 97, Surah Al-An'am, chapter number 6, verse 97. He it is who has made for you the stars, that you may follow the right direction in the darkness of the land and the sea. So God now takes our attention in order to point us towards that which exists within the cosmos, and that is the stars. Why? He it is who has made for you the stars. First of all, the verse begins by acknowledging that it is God who made the stars. In the previous one, it is God who causes the grain of corn. This comes back to a central principle within the religion of Islam, which is the principle of Tawheed, of the oneness of God, and that He is the originator and creator of the heavens and the earth. So God immediately is establishing and acknowledging that He is the creator of the heavens and the earth, and the stars. And if there's anyone that disagrees, then you've got God to argue with. So if you can put up a good enough argument, then good luck. He it is who has made for you the stars, that you may follow the right direction in the darkness of the land and the sea. So, in traditional places where they do not have access to the various means of technology and the GPS and the Navman and the TomTom, in order to guide themselves through the streets of darkness, they resort to the stars. And in this particular method, they will seek a means of guidance, that you may follow the right direction in the darkness of the land and the sea. So whether you're on land or whether you're on the sea, the stars will be a means of you seeking direction and orientation as to know which way you are headed and where you're coming from and where to go. We have explained, he continues, we have explained, meaning God, we have explained the signs of our existence, power and wisdom in detail for a people who know. So a people who don't know, then they're not going to understand the explanation. And this knowledge is not a knowledge of physical sciences, but it is a knowledge of the existence of an originator of the heavens and the earth. Again, a focal point within the Qur'an. So let us delve deeper into the spiritual fountains of this particular verse in the Qur'an. Allah, or God, made the stars of knowledge a means of guidance to follow amidst the difficulties of the legal actions and the spiritual wayfaring. A person wants to worship their Lord. How do they do it? There are various conditions and legal rulings which they must learn. And this will not be possible except through the knowledge. And so it is the stars of knowledge that will be a means of guidance for this person reaching God through their devotional practices. Furthermore, this spiritual wayfaring. For when the physical body is involved in devotion to the divine through the various movements or utterances on the tongue, or the refraining from taking in certain substances if a person is fasting and this becomes a means of spiritual devotion, then these are actions of the body. Also, the spirit itself, or the heart, has a means by which it wayfares and it travels to the divine. And so this knowledge, these stars of knowledge, will serve as the means for a person to reach God. And he says in the verse that you may follow the right direction in the darkness of the land and the sea. And so the ocean of the sacred Islamic law is the knowledge by which its people will traverse to God's paradise and pleasure. For the one who seeks God seeks only one thing and one thing alone, and that is God's pleasure. He doesn't seek paradise for paradise, nor does he flee from hellfire for hellfire, but rather he seeks God for God. How is this so, when God has described to us the greatness and beauty of the meadows and gardens of paradise? Yes, you seek the paradise, O servant of God, because it is in paradise where God has placed His pleasure, and it is in the hellfire where God has placed His displeasure and anger. And so you, in fact, seek God's pleasure through the paradise. However, that's a secondary purpose. Your primary purpose is to seek the pleasure of God. But how do you seek it, and how do you arrive at paradise? The ocean of the sacred law is the knowledge by which its people will traverse to God's paradise and pleasure. And furthermore, the ocean of the reality is the knowledge by which its people will traverse, seeking it, meaning the reality. And the reality in Arabic is called al-haqiqah, or the ultimate truth known as al-haq. And this is also one of the supreme names of God, being the truth and the ultimate truth. And the understanding of the divine attributes in essence, this is witnessed through the state of divine beauty and majesty. And so when one witnesses the beauty of the divine and the majesty of the divine, what's termed in Arabic sifat al-jamal wal-jalal, God has two categories of attributes, if you like. The first are those attributes of beauty, those attributes such as compassion and mercy and love and kindness. These attributes which a person sees beauty in these attributes. And then God has another set of attributes which are attributes of majesty. These are the attributes of superiority, the attributes of justice, the attributes of avenging, the attributes of compelling. These are attributes which will make manifest God's divine will and power on this earth and in all realms. For if we were in another realm, we would also witness these attributes. But both you see God's manifestation of His attributes of mercy and beauty, and also His attributes which are manifested via His majesty. And so these are a selection of some of the verses of the Qur'an. Only 2 verses which we have mentioned. 2 verses out of over 6,000 verses within the Qur'an. So we've given you 1 part out of 3,000 parts. And all that we have explained is one spiritual meaning of 2 simple verses of the Qur'an, which is extremely generous in the meanings which it gives to the one who ponders upon it. And so, I have today with me what's called the Essential Qur'an. And it's a translation of selected verses from the Qur'an in an easy to understand form. So anyone who would be interested in pondering upon the verses of the Qur'an and just allowing the Qur'an itself to speak to him, whether he is Muslim or not a Muslim, because even Muslims themselves, they need to know the beauty and the perfection and the address of the noble Qur'an. So it doesn't matter what faith that you follow. And the translation is a high-class translation by Thomas Cleary. It's called the Essential Qur'an. And perhaps in the time of questioning, the one who asks the best question, we can perhaps give them a copy of this book. And the second thing that I want to mention was, on this particular topic, I was quite pleased to see a translation of a classical interpretation of the Qur'an, which is along these lines, however only a small portion of it. This is a 14-volume commentary on the Qur'an by a Moroccan scholar by the name of Ibn Ajiba. anyone who's interested, take note of the name. His name is Ibn Ajiba, the son of Ajiba. In Arabic, Ajib means something amazing and strange. They call it Ibn Ajiba because, by God, his poetry is extremely strange and amazing. And so in it, he will present, first of all, the apparent and literal meanings of the verses in the words of the Qur'an. And then he will have a section which he calls ishara, or a sign or indication. And in this area, you will see the amazing powers that God has given this particular man to extract certain meanings through his pondering of the Qur'an, in which he will take you to an entirely different realm within the Holy Book. And this translation is in I think, paperback volume. It's called the Immense Ocean. The Immense Ocean by Ibn Ajiba, Ajiba. And this is only 3 chapters of the Qur'an and their interpretations, which have been translated from 114 chapters of the Qur'an. And so hopefully the entire work in its 14 volumes will be translated in the near future and be a means for people who seek spiritual guidance through the Qur'an in order for them to benefit from that.
Thank you for listening to This Is Your Faith with Shaykh Ahmed Abdo. If you've liked this podcast, we'd appreciate it if you left us a review on iTunes and Google Play. Help Seekers Hub spread the light of guidance to millions around the world by supporting us through monthly donations by going to seekershub.org/donate. Your donations are tax deductible in the US and Canada.